She'll join us. We'll get into some NBA postseason action. And where we're going to start here, Michael, is NFL OTAs because they are underway. We are getting reports already. Aaron Rodgers is perfect. 5 for 5 different receivers. We've got guys that are at the facility, on the practice field, guys that are holding out for the time being. But what does holding out really mean in OTAs? So there's a lot to dive into here.
Well, it's voluntary, so there's really no one holding out. Even if you have a contract, you're not obligated to go, so guys decide not to show. A lot of in and out. There used to be a rule, at least was either you're all in or you're all out, right? The hard part is when, coaches, can you count on a guy to come in? Are you coming today? No, I'm not. That's why when you have off-season workout bonuses within the contracts, you have some uniformity in terms of knowing what to expect, who's going to be there. And if you miss a day, you get a clearance. And even though it's voluntary, you're all in because of it. It's tied to your contract. So, look, don't make too much out of it. And when you have incomplete passes, you should be alarmed because there is no contact. Nobody's contesting a throw down the field. So all this nonsense about Aaron Rodgers is 5 for 5 and 7 on 7. I mean, he should be 5 for 5. He can be over to Ocean City High School and line up with the high school team here today and be 5 for 5. I mean, why not? So it's a little bit blown out of proportion. But I think it also tends to look at, and I'd love to hear what you think, is our love of football and how we scrutinize everything. Like, we just can't get enough of it.
Yeah, that's why when we talked last week with the NFL schedule release coming out, I'm like, we have the NBA and NHL postseason on our screens, yet my timeline on Twitter was filled with NFL content about games that we already knew were happening. Like, we already knew the home and road for each team. It just wasn't the order that we needed to be revealed. And that just goes to show it's such good evidence what the NFL is, how popular it is, and how invested we are in the sport. And you mentioned the phrase all in a couple times. I know it was unintentional, but it's a perfect transition to the Dallas Cowboys, who, when it comes to OTAs today, do not have CeeDee Lamb out there at the facility, do not have Micah Parsons. Both players, obviously, they're high on the priority list for Jerry Jones in Dallas to get under contract. Dak Prescott, still haven't seen anything firm, but he is expected to be there at the Star in Frisco.
Well, I would think he would be. I mean, look, let's face it. He's he's under contract. He's the team leader. He should be there. CeeDee Lamb is technically under contract. They picked up his 5th year, but we know he's looking for a deal. I think he's waiting for Jefferson to get done. I think he wants to do a deal before Jefferson gets done because then he can make the case, well, I'm better than Jefferson. Not sure that works, but at least he'll get as close to Jefferson as he can. And same thing with Parsons. I mean, Jerry, when he said he was all in, he was going to open the vault up for Parsons and for Lamb to pay those two and then have to pay Dak, who's already really overpaid. And I think ultimately Dak is going to continue to get paid because Dak's sitting there saying, well, Goff got this. I should make more than Goff. And maybe he's right. But that's what happens when the league is making so much money. It's got to go to somebody.
Well, and that's what we talked about last week when Jared Goff did get his deal done. The price tag's just going to continue to raise. He's now the second highest player in average annual value, over $200 million for 4 years. 35-year-old Kirk Cousins gets $180 million over 4 years, $100 guaranteed coming off a torn Achilles. And even Baker Mayfield got 9 digits, $100 million over 3 years. You have Dak, who's waiting in the wings. You have Tua and Trevor Lawrence, who both, by the way, are there for OTAs despite ongoing contract negotiations there. Jordan Love is going to be coming up soon. Just keep going down the list. The price tag is going to get higher and higher for these quarterbacks.
And for kickers, Stormy, Eddie Pinero's just holding out. He wants a new deal. I mean, kickers are people too. He's got to get a new deal. I mean, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Kickers are people too. That just made my day.
I mean, come on. He's holding out. Are you kidding me? Look, I know you need a good kicker. I get it. But Eddie Pinero hasn't exactly been like Adam Vinatieri or some of the other great kickers in our lifetime. I mean, seriously.
If he keeps holding out, Michael,
he is underpaid,
if he keeps going out, just go to the UFL. Get Jake Bates from Michigan, baby. He's ready and waiting. Him multiple 60-plus yarders.
I asked somebody in the league who's going to sign him, and I thought New England would be a team, and they said, no, New England's not in on him. And I'm like, why? Why wouldn't New England be in on this guy? And they brought Joey Silva back. Joey's missed so many kicks in it. He's got a great leg, don't get me wrong, But there's no way when he runs out there to make a clutch kick, you're thinking he's got this. There's just no way. I'm sorry. Right? I'm sorry. That's just not going to happen. But obviously, New England doesn't see it that way. They're going to go with Ryland.
And it's
who killed him last year? Who killed him? It's
fascinating, Michael, in the NFL that there are 32 of these jobs out there, and you still have such a lack of confidence for the bulk of, I feel like, field goal kickers that come out there in the NFL. And I mean, same thing. We talked so much about quarterbacks and injuries last year. There's only so many of these jobs available, yet there's still like a difference in the upper echelon of the league at that position versus the bottom. It's crazy to see the disparity there. But because you talked about CeeDee Lamb waiting for Justin Jefferson also not there at OTAs for the Minnesota Vikings. But I think that's interesting that CeeDee Lamb is going to try to get as close to as possible as what Justin Jefferson gets, because you tell me your opinion on this. Justin Jefferson's the better wide receiver to me, and I think to the majority of the football world. So I don't see a world where CeeDee Lamb is going to get more than that.
Yeah, but you're using logic, Stormy. In this free agent market, there is no logic, right? I mean, there's no way Jared Goff should be the second highest paid quarterback in the league, right? Mm-hmm. He's a good player, don't get me wrong, but he's not the second best highest paid quarterback. But this is what happens when water seeks its level. When one guy gets a deal, it sets the market for the next guy. And the quality of comparison doesn't really apply. It applies to, I need the guy, here is the market. And you can't really get a guy to take less than market deal. Should Tua be the highest paid quarterback in the league if that comes through? I find that hard to believe. Now, I'm sure some people would argue they think that's right. I don't. However, that being said, it's just look at the NBA. I mean, look how many guys are making money in the NBA that haven't the value of what they bring. It's by the TV deal. We get so caught up in the money, but the money is proportional to the income that they're bringing in. And you have to always quantify that.
So let's go down that road a little bit deeper, Michael, because today's What's on Michael's Mind is actually framed about the NBA and in relation to NFL and some of the dollars and cents that are going to some of these players. Take us through it.
Well, look, somebody put out a list, and I forget where I saw this, where they had the highest paid NBA players that are still in the playoffs. And there's only one, Rudy Gobert. Mm-hmm. Think about that. Steph Curry at $52 million, Embiid at 46, 47, LeBron, the Joker, Bradley Beal, Durant, Lillard, Giannis, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George. I mean, there's the Clippers have $90 million, $91 million, guys they barely see on the court. I mean, it's must be pretty good to be a billionaire to watch $90 million, just never see it play, right? And so, you wonder, at what point do you get your money value back? Now, look, I understand part of the equation is they bring eccentric value to the league. People are paying for this. The prices go up. They deserve it. Completely agree. But like I said yesterday, in coaching is when you get paid, there's an expectation. Like Deshaun Watson has a huge expectation on his plate because he can't keep being $250 million guaranteed and not produce wins. At some point, you have to produce wins. LeBron produced wins. Some of these guys are getting paid for past performance, not for future endeavors. Whereas, guys like Goff, he's going to have to win a Super Bowl, right? Or else he's going to look at he made a lot of money. Guys like Embiid, you can't be the second highest paid player in the league and not even get to the Eastern Finals. Think about it. So at some point, the level of expectation, and I think the NFL, as these numbers continue to go up, there's going to be less tolerance for people that are making this kind of money without delivering wins.
Yeah, I think that's a great example in comparison that where we're at, pay does not always equal performance. And you think about some of those marquee contracts that have gone bad. You mentioned Deshaun Watson, but Ezekiel Elliott, when he gets paid in Dallas, that's probably why Jerry Jones has all the emotional damage that he does about paying players right now. But it's a great point. And because Jared Goff did so recently get paid, and the Lions have made such steady steps of getting closer, and they make an NFC championship this past year, they have it in their grasp and let it fall away. You need to get back there. You need to keep continuing to take those steps forward. You have the experience on that stage. You have to continue to grow. And now it's not only Goff that's paid, it's Penei Sewell, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. And we've talked a lot this week and last about the hunger you need to maintain after your guys do make that payday.
No question. And at some point you want to win. you have to win. It really only comes down to winning, right? It only comes down to, did we win a title? For all the money San Francisco's paid for all their skill players, they got to win. And they've gotten to the 2 Super Bowls, they haven't been able to come through, right? You got to win, and they've won. Same thing with the Chiefs. I mean, look, the Chiefs get rid of Tyreek Hill and they win 2 Super Bowls. Think about that for a moment.
I know, Michael, but I didn't expect you to throw the 49ers under the bus there just now, okay? But you're 100% right. It just hurts my soul. And I joked about this with Elliot earlier. But
they have won, though. My point is they have won. They've gotten there, right? I mean, it isn't like they haven't gotten there. They've got to. They just haven't been able to. They've had leads in the fourth quarter of those games. They just haven't been able to close them out. They're completely different than, say, like, a team that's like, that has spent a ton of money that hasn't come through.
They've gotten there, but the window is closing. And eventually you're going to have to figure out what to do with the wide receiver room. Eventually you're going to have to pay Brock Purdy. And so I just keep thinking about it from that standpoint. You've gotten there, but you haven't won. And the Kansas City Chiefs are a team that used to be very likable and that I enjoyed a lot, that after those Super Bowls, and I mean, all the offseason craziness that they've had too, becoming less likable by the day. We'll be right back. Plenty more to come on the Lombardi Line.
This is the Lombardi Line with former NFL executive Michael Lombardi. Now here is your host, Stormy Buonantony, on VSiN, the sports betting network.
For a limited time only, we're offering our VSiN annual subscription at an unreal price, usually $240. You can grab a full subscription now for just $199. Sign up today because we're also giving you an extra 2 months for free if you do. That's 14 months of VSiN Pro access for less than 50 cents a day when you use the promo code Lombardi. With VSiN Pro, you'll gain instant access to our daily best bets with a leaderboard to see which VSiN expert has the hot hand, betting splits to show you where the money and bets are moving for each and every game, betting systems, premium analysis, and 24/7 video access. Visit VSiN.com/subscribe today to claim your 14 months of VSiN Pro for only $199, but you got to use that promo code Lombardi. Welcome back into this Tuesday edition of the Lombardi Line. Michael Lombardi and Stormy Buonantony with you. And this is the time of year, Michael, in the NFL offseason where everybody's excited about their team. There's all this optimism, but only a handful are actually going to go on to make the playoffs. Only one is going to win the Super Bowl. So we wanted to go through some of these perceived contenders and teams that have a lot of hype around them right now and see if we as bettors should believe the hype or not. Sound good?
Sounds perfect to me. There's a lot of hype. We know that. Everybody's loves everybody, right?
We are going to start with the hype train of all hype trains, everybody's favorite team in the New York Jets, led by Aaron Rodgers, who's back off Achilles surgery. Robert Saleh said in his Tuesday press conference yesterday, by the way, Rodgers is doing everything. He'll have no restrictions during OTAs. We joked about the report off the top of the show here that he's 5 for 5 to 5 different receivers. He's apparently putting on a show out there at OTAs and 5-on-5 and 7-on-7, all the things. Is this a team that people should believe the hype on?
They certainly should. I mean, look, let's face it. The guy is a good player. He was a good player. And the hype is centered around the 21-22 season, the 20 and 21 season. The 22 season wasn't good enough, right? And so the 23 season, we never saw him. So we know that he's coming off a bad year in Green Bay and then the injury. So I do think they deserve the hype. They are good on defense, right? They have made some adjustments to their offensive line, which should help. And Rodgers will certainly help them by getting rid of the football very quickly. However, that being said, there's a lot of if factors to the Jets' hype, right? If they can stay healthy. I do think it's smart that the league put them in a lot of games early to get a taste for what they're going to become, because if they have certain injuries at certain positions, this could fall apart pretty quickly.
Win total for the Jets, 9.5. It is juiced to the over at -130. New York, just for reference, hasn't had more than 7 wins in a season since 2015. They have the longest playoff drought in American major professional sports right now. Yet the hype and expectations, to your point, are sky high, and rightfully so because of the talent that they have on their team. Early on in the season, though, DraftKings has wins in their first 5 games. The favorite of this board right now for the Jets is for them to come out of those first 5 with 3 wins. They're at San Francisco to start off the season on Monday night, at Tennessee on the short week, versus New England, versus Denver, and against Minnesota in an international game. So of certainly 3 to 4 very winnable games there. We've talked about how San Francisco is hot and cold in season openers. If you had to pick one of these numbers that stood out to you for how many wins they would have through the first 5 weeks, what stands out?
I would say 3 at plus 160.
Okay.
They should be able to come back. They beat the Titans, beat the Patriots. The Broncos game will be a challenge. And then, between the Broncos and the Vikings, they got to split one of those and you get it.
Okay. For them to go winless in the first 5, 50-1, 1 win, 10-1, 2 wins, 3-1, 3, like we said, plus 164.
It's hard for them to go winless.
I think so
I can't imagine they could go winless.
They're too good. Yeah. I mean, you get.
What would you play? Would you play, 3 or 4?
I actually think 4 is pretty reasonable. If all goes to plan.
Yeah.
If all goes to plan for this team right out the gates, I think 4 is actually very much so in play. But 3 plus 164 plus 200. How about the Atlanta Falcons? Let's stick with quarterbacks that are coming off of Achilles surgery. Kirk Cousins, by the way, claims he's good to go. He said on the Dan Patrick Show this week, I've told people for a while that if the Super Bowl were today, I'm playing. Well, how about if the regular season were today? How would you be doing, Kirk? Their win total set at 9.5, juice to the over as well, minus 135. High expectations for this Falcons team. Should we believe the hype?
Yeah, no, I don't think we believe the hype here. Because look, they're just not good enough on. I mean, are we sure they're good on defense? Are we sure they are? I mean, that's the problem I have. Now, look, I think Raheem Morris is going to help them, no question, as a defensive coordinator. Jimmy Lake's there with him. He's also from the Rams. Zach Robinson, the offensive coordinator. I think we're not sure whether Cousins is going to be the right player. Is the offensive line going to be good enough? Do they have a home field advantage? I think there's a lot of hype here. I mean, this is the same hype last year. I think everybody's over-evaluated Atlanta. Atlanta thought they were one player away. I'm not sure of that.
For their first 5 wins, the season opens up against the Steelers. They're at the Eagles. Then they have the defending Super Bowl champion Chiefs against the Saints and against the Bucks. How many wins would you expect them to have as you're looking at that schedule? That's the harder part of their schedule, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard one. They don't have it easy. They don't have it easy. Boy, this is a tough one here. I'll go 3 in the first 5. What do you think?
Yeah, I was saying, so it depends if you're believing the hype. If you're believing the hype, you think 3, 4 at least, right? If you're not believing the hype, you probably say 2, say the Steelers are going to be really tough out. At Philadelphia is hard. Kansas City, you mark that as an L, right? Like, it just depends on which view you have of this team. I'm not sure yet. I think I'm going to use those early season games as a radar for me of whether or not I should believe the hype. But as of the preseason, I'm not confident. You got a 35-year-old coming off an Achilles. We don't know what we're going to get from the defense, as you referenced. I don't have the confidence there in the preseason right now, coming off a 7-win season. Again, the win total for the Falcons, 9.5, an odds-on favorite in the NFC South at minus 130. The Chicago Bears, Michael, another team that has struggled for years and years and years, yet has a ton of expectations and hype around them with the number 1 overall pick, Caleb Williams, coming to town. They also get another toy to play with in the top 10 in Roma Dunze. Lots of offensive talent and a defense that really stepped up their game the back end of last season. Their win total set at 8.5, minus 165 the juice on the over here. Are we believing the early hype in Chicago?
Well, I think they're going to be much improved. They got to stay healthy. I would say let's buy it. Let's tentatively buy it. 2 road games to start out the season, not easy, right? Houston at Indianapolis. They play 2 teams that they have really no familiarity with at all. Houston from the AFC South, Indianapolis from the AFC South. They come back and play NFC opponents, and then they end up before the bye week, another AFC South team. So 3 of their 5 opponents, they really don't have any relationship with in terms of continuation of play. I think, to me, if they can win 2 of the 5 to start off, I think that's pretty damn good, to be honest with you, Stormy.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Can they beat the Panthers? Yeah. Can they beat the Jags? I think the Rams will be a hard game. Matthew Stafford coming back into Soldier Field. He knows how to play in there. You know, you're hoping they could split one of those games in Houston or in Indianapolis. Rookies on the road. I mean, we saw that last year. As good as Stroud was, he struggled early in the year on the road.
I was thinking of those 5 games. 2, you can certainly feel pretty good about locking in if you believe they're going to carry over in a positive way from last season, Tennessee and Carolina. And then it's a matter of if you can split with Houston and Indy, because I personally would think the Rams would be a loss, and I think the Texans is going to be a loss. But Indy could be a win. So I would say 2 or 3 to have 2 wins for the Bears plus 370, 3 in the first 5 plus 215. Let's talk about those Houston Texans, though, because C.J. Stroud throwing no-look passes today, according to reports on Twitter coming out of their OTAs.
Of course.
Stephon Diggs and Danielle Hunter might not be there right now, but they will be. Lots of weapons, expectations that this Houston team is going to take another step forward. They're a plus 110 favorite in the division, minus 140 the juice on the over for 9.5 wins. So a double-digit plus win season for a team that won a playoff game a year ago. Are we believing the hype? Will they continue to build?
Yeah, I think they will. They got a good team. They got a good young quarterback, right? So, and they play the Hall of Fame game, which is interesting. They have the 4 preseason games, which gives them a chance, not that Stroud's going to play in it, but to work through some of this, because they've got a roster of a lot of depth in terms of trying to figure out who should make the team and who shouldn't. They open up at home against Chicago. They got to go to Minnesota. They should be 2-0 coming home against Jacksonville. That's a game they have to win at home. Buffalo at home is going to be like a Super Bowl for them, right? Mm. And it's Sunday at 1. Think about that. It's going to be Sunday at 1 o'clock, that game. Then they go to New England. I mean, they should be 4-1 after 5 games. That's plus 250. Plus, 3 at plus 185. I mean, there's going to probably be an upset somewhere in there. Because remember now, Stormy, everybody has spent a lot of time studying this Houston Texan team.
Yeah.
They're all over them. I mean, they're going to have to do something different to kind of play a different style or a different look to keep people off of what they want to do.
And there's a difference, too, between last year where you've got a new coaching staff, a rookie quarterback, and everybody's just hopeful that you do okay. Now you have expectations. You were a 10-win team a year ago. You won a critical playoff game in round 1. People think that you're going to be poised to repeat in the division. Like, the way that you're perceived is very different now. So how do you handle that ultimately? Okay, we're going to take a quick timeout.
This is the Lombardi Line with former NFL executive Michael Lombardi. Now here is your host, Stormy Buonantony, on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
You know we here at VSiN and the Lombardi Line love to help you out, and right now we have an awesome offer that can do just that. Our annual subscription is usually $240, but if you subscribe right now, you can get it for $199, and you'll also get an extra 2 months for free. So that's 14 months of VSiN Pro access for less than 50 cents a day, and all you need to do to cash in is use our promo code for this show, Lombardi, Lombardi. With VSiN Pro, you'll gain instant access to our daily best bets with a leaderboard to see which VSiN expert has the hot hand, betting splits to show you where the money and bets are moving for every game, betting systems, premium analysis, and 24/7 video access. Visit VSiN.com/subscribe today to claim your 14 months of VSiN Pro for only $199, but you gotta use that code Lombardi. Alongside Michael Lombardi, Stormy Buonantony with you. Time to discuss if, with the hype train rolling for these NFL teams, if we want to hop on the train or take the risk of just jumping off and saying, sorry, Charlie, that's not going to happen. Let's start with the Dallas Cowboys, who maybe there's not the usual amount of hype around them, but because they are the Dallas Cowboys and they're America's team, they're being talked about more than just about any other team not named the Jets. So 3 straight 12-win seasons, Michael. Win total set at 10.5. Juice is actually on the under here, minus 120. Over is at even money. But are you believing the hype that in what feels like a Super Bowl or bust year, that things could happen for Dallas?
I'm not buying that hype. I have said this and have been on record. I thought they overachieved last year. Nobody wants to. It's like Mike McCarthy's like Tom Thibodeau. Nobody wants to give him credit for anything, right? Nobody, no matter what happens with the Knicks, it wasn't Thibodeau. It was something else, right? It was the water at the garden. It was the popcorn. It's the same thing with Dallas. Dak has his best year, and it wasn't McCarthy. It had to be Kellen Moore's tutelage when he left. I don't know. But to me, the concerns about the offensive line, their inability to beat good teams, And who's going to help? Who's going to cover on defense? Diggs last year missed all the season with ACL. He takes a lot of chances. How good are they on defense? Parsons' contract always worries you. CeeDee Lamb's contract always worries you. And then you look, they open up on the road in Cleveland, and if things don't go well, say they go to Cleveland and lose, come back and beat the Saints, right? And say they lose at home to Baltimore. Now they get to go play the Giants, Pittsburgh, and Detroit before. I mean, they have a chance to be 3-3, but 3-3 in Dallas is going to weigh heavy on you.
If you think you can get 3 of those wins, plus 190 in the wins in the first 5 games market that you saw on your screen a moment ago. But yeah, it's a team, Michael, that has so much pressure on them, and this was one of those things that I already knew the answer because we talked about it in hour 1. But I still had to tee it up, like see if maybe I could tie you in and buy you in on doing something else. You mentioned the lack of success against good teams. Another team that had that narrative about them is the Miami Dolphins. They had the number 1 offense in the NFL last year. They returned to Tagovailoa, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, added more talent, bringing in OBJ and Jonnu Smith. But can you believe in Tua and the hype around this team, especially when you take the defense into consideration? New DC and Anthony Weaver, no Christian Wilkins, at least 4 new starters on that side of the ball. Should we get on the hype train or off?
Well, I'm not on the hype train. I think the East isn't as good as it was last year. I still think Buffalo, because of Josh Allen, is the best team. But if you think they can get 3 wins, if they have Buffalo and Jacksonville at home, and they have Tennessee, and they go to Seattle and they go to New England. I mean, 3 wins at plus 180 is very doable here, don't you think?
Yeah.
I mean, 4 wins. I mean, they're going to beat New England. They should beat Jacksonville in the opener. We'll see. Or they should beat Buffalo. We'll see. But playing Buffalo on a Sunday night at home, you got a better chance for a Thursday go to Seattle. Probably be a hard game, but they have a 10-day rest, so that helps them. You got Tennessee at home. They're going to beat those, and then they got to go to New England. And I'm not sure New England's going to have a hard time. So I think they can win 3. I think plus 180 at 3 wins or plus. But I'm not buying them because I think as the schedule goes, they have Green Bay in November 28th, hard game. They got to go to Cleveland December 29th, cold. The Jets, January. They end up 2 games on the road in cold weather. You're not getting me. And in between those 2 games, before those 2 games, they have San Francisco at home and they have to go to Houston. You're not getting me there on that.
Yeah, so the win total is 9.5, juiced it to the over at minus 135. And with that in mind, if you're going to want that win total over, you're going to have to stockpile those wins early in the season. The good news is 8 of their first 11 games are against teams that missed the playoffs last year. But we've also seen under Mike McDaniel as their head coach that the Dolphins have struggled the back half of their schedule. They're 4-10 in December or later, including a pair of playoff losses to Kansas City and Buffalo. If they want to change the narrative, they have to beat good teams. And that goes back to a lot of our conversation that we've had about Miami last year and the way that things ultimately fell apart for them. Another team that has the hype train, and they did, quite frankly, going into last year, too, and lived up to it, if not exceeding some of the expectations, the Detroit Lions. They're coming off their first division title since 1993. They should have beat, as much as I'm happy that it didn't happen, they should have beat the 49ers in the NFC Championship. They're up 17 at halftime and can't hold on. They are rolling. This offseason reshaped their defense. They got their key pieces on offense re-signed. Should we be buying the hype that the Detroit Lions can not only get to another NFC title, but maybe win it this year?
I think they're good, and I think they're going to be improved. I think the first game of the year is going to be fascinating. I mean, the Rams coming, they open up with the Rams on Sunday night. Matthew Stafford back again, and we get a repeat playoff game. Yeah. We'll know the Rams will be really ready to play. But other than that, before they hit the bye, they got Tampa, Arizona, and Seattle. They can get 3 wins there. They could get 4 wins. Then they go to Dallas, Minnesota. I like the team. I think they've improved the areas that they needed to improve. Offensively, they helped. They lost an offensive lineman. They were able to sign Kevin Zeitler back. But for me, the key has been their secondary, and they've improved in that area. And I think that's really going to make a huge difference for them.
The favorite in the wins in first 5 games is 3 as well, plus 175, 2 plus 250, 4 plus 300. I think they could get 3 wins out of that first 5. I guess the one at Dallas is kind of a big question mark since that's coming out of the bye, though. They should feel good about themselves there. But this is a 12-win team last year, tied for the second best record in the NFL. With the hype comes standalone games as well. If you look at their schedule big picture, with their win total sitting at 10.5, 5 primetime games in 2024, including their annual Thanksgiving Day game against the Bears. But they lived up to it in primetime last year, 5-1 in primetime games last season, including the playoffs. Let's keep it in that division, in that realm. The Green Bay Packers, Jordan Love, prior to the Packers divisional round loss to San Francisco last year, had a run of 21 touchdowns and just 1 interception. They won 7 and 9 games in that time to finish 9 and 8 on the year, secured a playoff win in Dallas in the wild card round. Love's already put himself in the conversation for a trendy MVP pick, and he'll certainly have the opportunity to do so head to head with some other really good quarterbacks of note. Are you believing the hype in Green Bay?
I am, because I think Hafley will make a difference defensively for them. I think he's going to help their defense improve. But that was the issue last year. And at the second half, look, at the beginning of the year, when you watch Green Bay, they were doing everything in their power to make sure that Love didn't beat them, right? They had no faith really in Love as a quarterback. But eventually he won them over. And I think the addition of Josh Jacobs, who can do a lot of things that Aaron Jones did, but he's a more power back if he's in shape. But the key to this team has got to be they have to improve their run defense. They've got to get better, and they've got to create turnovers. They should be able to pressure the passer at a higher rate. Last year, they were 31st in interceptions. They were 23rd in turnovers defensively. They couldn't stop the run. They're 28th in yards allowed on the ground, 23rd in yards per attempt, which is significant considering that 26th in the league in people trying to run the ball on them. I mean, people were running the ball on them because they knew they could. If they don't stop that, it's going to be a problem. And I think that ultimately is got to be something that they fix. Look, they lose on the road to the Giants, a horrible loss. They come back and lose to Tampa at home, another bad loss. And then they reel off 3 wins, Carolina, Minnesota, and Chicago, and they get in, and then they destroy Dallas. I think the momentum's with them.
A really potentially challenging stretch of the schedule coming out of the bye. They're at the Bears, who, if they end up being the team that people expect them to be, would be a challenge. But then you've got the 49ers, the Miami Dolphins, and the Lions all back to back to back. Teams who combined to go 35-11 last season. Win total for the Packers sitting 10.5. You are getting plus money, though, on the over if you think they can exceed expectations, if you're believing the hype. Last one here real quickly. Jim Harbaugh has exceeded expectations every stop that he has been at, turning around programs quickly. Are you believing the hype in LA?
Yeah, I am. I think, look, I believe this. One of the reasons I think the Raiders are going under is because I'm not sure about Pierce as a coach and Gardner Minshew. Then on this game, I'm because it's quarterback and head coach for me. I like Justin Herbert. I love Jim Harbaugh. Quarterback and coach, he's always improved the team, and I think he'll improve this team.
They struggled in the division last year, got swept by the Broncos, swept by the Chiefs, won one of those games against the Raiders. The other is the one that cost their head coach his job. Win total sitting 8.5 for the Chargers. Juice to the over, -155. People are believing in what Jim Harbaugh can do from a culture standpoint and getting the most out of his players. We're going to hit the break.
This is the Lombardi Line with former NFL executive Michael Lombardi. Now here is your host, Stormy Buonantony, on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
We're so close to crowning an NBA champ, and with the action heating up on the court, it's even hotter at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. New to DraftKings, listen up, new customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500. Just deposit at least $5, and you'll get a bonus bet equal to your first bet if it doesn't hit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code VSiN. The crown is yours. We had Will Hill on moments ago who said he likes the Pacers plus the double digits coming up tonight. Later on in hour 2, we'll get more thoughts on that series as well as both the Eastern and Western Conference Finals with Claudia Bellafato, DraftKings Network host and betting analyst. But again, that coming up a little bit later on in the show. Where we're going to start out right here, Michael, is Lombardi's list for the week, counting down the top 5 new coordinators who can make an immediate impact. And I love this just in general because with all of the talk about free agency and player turnover and players coming in and out of the draft, new head coaches that are in their new positions. I think sometimes coordinators get swept under the rug a little bit here, and they are extremely important, especially like in developing continuity and chemistry among your team.
You know, and I think, too, it's a great point. I mean, look at what Mike McDonald was able to do for the Baltimore Ravens, right? And so you see this all the time. Jim Schwartz last year going to Cleveland changed their whole defense, right? If Jim Schwartz would have gone to Green Bay, what would that have looked like? And so I think these are really important hirings. And when you get the right coach and the right system, Ben Johnson, who knew how good of a coach Ben Johnson was for Detroit, but he sure made a big difference for the Lions. So I think these are the untold behind the scenes where we as a bettor and betting networks, we don't pay enough attention to it. You know, I was listening to somebody talking about Atlanta offense, and they were complaining about Atlanta doesn't use they're never in 11 personnel. And I'm sitting there, I'm listening to it, and I'm like, they're killing Arthur Smith, right? They're in 11. Atlanta was in 11 most of the time last year because Kyle Pitts isn't a tight end. He's a wide receiver. So they're in 11 all the time. So, you know, guys get criticized for not being good coordinators by people that don't understand what the hell's going on. Like, Atlanta was an 11 team last year because they had to be because Pitts can't block anybody. So you have to kind of look into that. And I think he'll do a good job. I think Arthur going into Pittsburgh, I think that's a good marriage right there.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that a little bit further, because as I look at your list here, we are a little defensive coordinator heavy. The one offensive coordinator that you have in a new place you expect to make an immediate impact is Arthur Smith over there in Pittsburgh, a team that has a new quarterback situation, has a lot of talent offensively. But as you were just saying, a lot of the questions and critiques about Arthur Smith in Atlanta were about underutilizing the talent that they had. Why do you think Smith can get the most out of this group in Pittsburgh?
Well, because he's not working around players that have alignment of positions that don't really play the position, right? So if you're going to call plays for the Falcons and you want to be an 11 personnel team, which is what all the analytical community wants them to be, right? Well, who's going to block if you're in 70 protection? Is Pitts going to stay in and block a defensive end? I don't think so. Okay, so you can't run 70 protection. Right? Is Bijan Robinson going to handle the back? I don't know. Can he handle the blitzer? I don't know. Could he handle Parsons coming off the edge? There you're asking an awful lot, right? So a lot of this, when you start looking at just formation groupings, the way they break coaches down, and you don't understand that there's players that go into the plays, then you're really going to get a bad view of somebody. Smith will run the ball. He will have a good run game. Now, obviously, he's got to develop the play-action pass game. He's had success with Ryan Tannehill doing that. Look, if Pittsburgh gets behind, they're not going to win very many games. They're not going to have a drop. You don't want a drop-back pass game with Russell Wilson. So they're going to have to slow it down, play their style, create turnovers with their defense. Don't give the ball away. Get the game into the fourth quarter and win it. But that's kind of the way they've always played.
In 6 of the 7 losses last year, so they won 10 games last year. In 6 of the 7 losses, the Steelers' offense scored 13 points or fewer. Like, just imagine, like, the defense played so well. You're losing games because of that. Just imagine if the offense came together. So I understand a lot of reason to believe positivity there. We'll see if they can overcome the back end of the schedule, though, like we talked about with Will in the last segment. Let's go to the first defensive coordinator on the list, though. In Green Bay, Jeff Hafley takes over for the departed Joe Barry. Why do you have confidence in him?
Well, I think it gives a fresh approach, right? And Hafley has coached the back end to the front end, which is important. And look, this is a team that couldn't make any plays on the football. They're 31st in the National Football League in interceptions. And really what killed the Packers last year was their inability to stop the run. Then there were games where they could, right? They've got a good front. They should be able to stop the run. They're physical up front. But last year they were 28th in yards allowed on the ground. Teams went in there and tried to throw the ball. 2 things hurt Green Bay last year. They could not turn the ball over with their defense. 31st in interceptions, 23rd overall in defensive committed turnovers, forcing the defense. And then they couldn't stop the run. And when you can't stop the run, it really becomes down to your inability to tackle, your inability to play physical, and you never get control of the football game. You never can get control of the game because if they can get 3.5, 4, they're going to keep the ball. And I think that Hafley will do a better job of controlling the run. I think he'll move pieces around. We don't talk enough about this either, Stormy. If you're a stagnant defense where you have guys line up in the same place all the time, the offense can dictate and control the pace of the game. So, for example, if you want to put a player over on the left side of the defense or the right side of the defense, left side of the offense, and you just have to get in a formation, he's there. Now he's going against your best player. But when you have unpredictability with alignment, then it becomes a challenge. San Francisco doesn't get in this game because San Francisco feels like they're so good up front, they don't need to worry about it. Whereas the Jets do this too, and sometimes it creates problems for them.
Your point with the run defense, you said it ranked 28th in rushing yards allowed per game, 23rd in yards allowed per rush, and 31st in the league with 7 interceptions only for the entire season. Wild to think about. There are 2 coordinators, by the way, in the NFC East that you're looking at, in the Dallas Cowboys and Philadelphia Eagles. Also the new DC in Seattle. Take us through it.
Well, let's talk with Mike Zimmer, right? Mike Zimmer is about third down, right? And last year, when you look at the Cowboys on those third down defense, they were good. They were the second best third down team in the league with Dan Quinn. They were very good. And, you know, when you watch them play, they were able to create turnovers even without Diggs. So they're 5th overall in points allowed and yards. So Zimmer will come in, and it's a different approach. But he's a really good coach in terms of attacking the opponent. I think they'll play better run defense, and I think they'll play better in the red zone. They were still good in the red zone last year. I mean, all the things Dallas did last year, but they were 19th in the league in the red zone. They were 14th on third down. I think those numbers will go up with Zimmer when you look at that. Now, Philly, let's talk about them for a second. Philly, you know, there was an issue with Philly, and certainly it had to do with their talent as much as their coaching, right? You know, Sean Desai took a lot of the blame. They demoted him, and then they brought in Matt Patricia. But a lot of this problems in Philly stem from their inability to stay in condition. Remember, they gave up 35 points to Arizona, and it wasn't a pretty 35. They gave up 32 to Baker Mayfield. They couldn't run. Now, they try to fix it with their defensive front, right? So they get Bryce Huff in there. They keep Sweat. You know, but they got to stay in shape. They don't practice hard enough at times. And I think Vic Fangio probably will come in and they'll listen to him a little bit more. And he'll try to play the coverage that fits him. And I think their draft helped them because getting Mitchell in there certainly will help them in terms of being able to have a third corner and a reliable third corner.
Yeah, Quinyon Mitchell, by the way, 11-1 to be the defensive rookie of the year, but somebody expected to make an immediate impact. No, Kellen Moore made this list, Michael. I'm so surprised.
Well, I know, but I'm as fascinated to see what Moore will do because, look, I think the success of Philly, and I think Philly had cold water slapped on their face last year because they didn't run the ball, and Hurts all of a sudden they paid all this money to, and he looked very pedestrian-like. And so what happened? He didn't connect to his teammates. I think the reason for Barkley was now they started to zig when everybody else was zagging. They went back to saying, okay, we need a running game. We need an elite back. They could have signed Miles Sanders. They said, no, we'll go with a cheaper variation. We'll do Swift. We'll do Penny. We'll do all this. Didn't work. They know they have to run the ball. It's going to be fascinating to see what Kellen Moore does with the offense. Will he run it? And then will Kellen Moore adapt to – look, Hurts is a really good player, but he has to be half-field reads, play-action pass. That's where he's working his best. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean anything's wrong with it. That's just how he operates. If they can't do that, if they try to read this through horizontally, it will be a problem for them.
And after the back end of last season fell apart for the Philadelphia Eagles, very high expectations to get back on track and get back to the team that Philly was 2 years ago and the team that they thought they were early on last season. Okay, we're going to hit the break here. When we come back, resetting for hour 2 of the Lombardi Line. Lots to get to in regards to the NFL, the schedule, not a report card, but the attendance list for OTAs continues to grow longer. And what's on Michael's mind? Stick around. So much more to come on the Lombardi Line.
This playoff season, get the edge with VSiN's expert coverage of the